The run game in Josh Heupel's offensive system might be the most underrated thing in college football right now. That and a whole lot more here on your Thursday Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, good people? Welcome into it. This is Locked On Vols, and I am your host, Eric King. Glad to have you guys along with us here today. Got a busy show coming up today. We're going to talk Tennessee running backs in segment 1, catch up with Lucas Panzica of 104.5 The Zone in segment 2, and tie a bow on it here in segment 3. A whole lot to get into, talking NFL draft, Darnell Wright, Jalen Hyatt, Tennessee running backs. It's going to be a fun show, and of course, Tennessee opens up play in the SEC tournament later this afternoon, so looking forward to that. You can always follow this podcast at _Caner on Twitter and at Locked On Vols. And really looking forward to having you guys join us the show. If you're new to the show, pull up a chair, let me know what you think. Please subscribe to the channel, and you can always find it wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, Josh Heupel's run game in his offense might be the most underrated thing in college football today. Because I say that because everybody thinks of this Josh Heupel system, long splits and throwing it all over the yard and, scoring a whole lot of points, and all that is true, but nobody ever talks about the run game. Jordan Marshall, 4-star running back who was on campus for one of the junior days in January, he actually met with VolQuest and said, hey, I thought it was a pass-happy system. I thought this was all throw. I didn't realize how much the running backs are utilized in the system until I got here today. And I feel like, for a high school prospect to say that, it's true because I think that's what a lot of people say around the country. Let me throw some stats at you right here. Josh Heupel's offense, the run game, 2 years at Tennessee, the run game has averaged over 200 yards rushing both seasons. 200 yards rushing a game in both seasons. That's getting it done, right? I mean, that's pick them up, putting them down. That is not a small amount to average per game, especially in SEC play, right? But that's what it's looked like the past 2 years, the 2 years here on Rocky Top for Josh Heupel. Josh Heupel's offense led the nation in total offense, in scoring offense, but also in rushing touchdowns. 39 rushing touchdowns in 2022. That led the nation. It's a pretty good stat. It's a stat nobody talks about. So whenever I hear national columnists or radio hosts or podcasters from around the country in terms of college football speak on the Josh Heupel offense, and they say all they do is air it out, and they long splits, and they score a lot of points, and throw this, throw that, it has no run game, it's perplexing to me, because the run game is so very much important to what Josh Heupel does and to the success of this offense overall, and he'll be the first to tell you. In fact, I've said this many times. Josh Heupel said it in his introductory press conference. He said, for us to be where we want to be and to reach the goals that we want to reach, we have to have a run game. And Tennessee's run game has been fantastic under Josh Heupel. So what's that look forward to in 2023? What about the spring practice? Look at the running back positions here and kind of what Tennessee has to work with in spring practice. And ultimately, what will that catapult them into looking like as a room in 2023? Well, for starters, Tennessee is set to return 80% of its rushing yards from this past year's squad. The top 3 options out of the backfield are all set to be back as well. That's big. So you have Jabari Small, who's been pretty much the 1A at the running back by committee a little bit, or the starter, depending on what week of the season you're in. He's going to be back. Jalen Wright, who led the team in rushing, is going to be back. Dylan Sampson, who came on and provided a big splash as a change of pace back a little bit, he'll be back. Tennessee is going to add Cam Seldon, who's going to be a running back this spring most likely as a freshman. Deshaun Bishop is going to be into that mix, a local product. And then Khalifa Keith, who will be a part of this team. He's going to be a scholarship running back, but will not be here in spring. He is not an early enrollee. So let's start with Jabari Small. Biggest thing about Small is he's injury plagued. He's got that shoulder deal, right? It's been hampering him the last 2 seasons, trying to finish games, and unfortunately, that shoulder deal kind of caused him to miss some time again in 2022. I don't think that that's going to be going away. I think that's something he will always deal with as long as he puts on the shoulder pads for as long as he continues to play. But he's the first option out of the backfield. He led Tennessee with 12 rushing touchdowns. That was second most among SEC running backs. He finished with 696 yards, nearly 5 yards per carry. Those are both pretty good stats. He added 106 yards through the air, 2 receiving touchdowns. He had his best showing of the season at LSU, 22 carries, 127 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So really nice option A at running back in Jabari Small. But the option 1B is who I think is going to be the man for Tennessee in 2023. That would be Jalen Wright. He should have gotten more opportunities this past football season. I think you'd agree with that as well. I think he was the most explosive. I think he was the best running back Tennessee had. Sure, he had some fumbling issues earlier in the season, but he missed all fall camp. He missed all spring. I just think he gave Tennessee the best chance of a home run hitter, especially with how, sure, the splits are wide in this offense. It's a zone blocking scheme. That means vertical run lanes. That means, taking the ball, finding that hole, and getting upfield. I think Jalen Wright provided the best opportunity for big plays in terms of Tennessee running backs. He led all Tennessee backs in rushing with 786 yards on only 135 carries. That's averaging 5.8 yards per carry. Scored 10 touchdowns on the year. Had a career day at Vanderbilt, where this is a perfect example of why he needed more run, right? No pun intended. 160 yards on 5 carries. 160 yards on 5 carries. He averaged 32 yards a carry, right? He had touchdown runs of 50 and 83 yards. He passed the century mark just once on the year. That was that Vanderbilt game, but came close on several occasions. I think he had 88 yards against Ball State, 96 yards against Akron, 70 yards in a win over Alabama and Kentucky. So I think he's going to be the guy for Tennessee. It's just a matter of staying healthy and holding on to the football. Dylan Sampson, a nice little option there as a true freshman. Missed a little bit of time, missed a block at LSU. Didn't see him for a couple of weeks. Then he came back in, was a big focal point of the offense later in the season. He had 2 really good games late in the year, 98 yards on 8 carries against Missouri, 131 yards on 12 carries against Vanderbilt. Had an 80-yard touchdown run as well. He arrived in June. He was a late arrival, but he certainly, bested former Tennessee freshman running back Justin Williams-Thomas, who is now, I believe, at Cal after announcing a commitment to Stanford. I think he ended up at Cal. But Dylan Sampson, I think, is going to be a big one in this offense as well. Tennessee, at this point in time, didn't lose anybody except Justin Williams-Thomas, who went to the transfer portal. You're bringing in Khalifa Keith, who could be that change of pace, big back option. Long strides, very explosive, a strong lower body, 3-star, but a running back that some SEC teams, including Kentucky, were very much in on towards the end. I don't think he'll be a home run hitter. I do think he will be that big-time back in this offense that Tennessee's been looking for, potentially next year, maybe down the road. Cam Seldon could also be that. He's 6'1", about 215, 220 pounds. Dynamic athlete who I think can play a little wide receiver, play a little running back as well. But I think he'll be put in the running back room in spring first because Jabari Small, I think, and Jalen Wright might be limited to what they can do in spring with some off-season surgeries and procedures. So that means Cam Seldon, Dylan Sampson. That means Deshaun Bishop, I think, are going to get a whole lot of run. Again, no pun intended. So, I think Tennessee is going to look good in the run game again in 2023. They ranked 20th nationally with 2,469 rushing yards in 2022, but again, led the nation in rushing touchdowns at 39. Continues to average, only team in the country to average over 300 yards passing and 200 yards rushing in a game last season. That was the Tennessee Volunteers. The run game, nobody's talking about it. The most underrated thing in college football right now for the best offense in the country, that is the run game for Tennessee under Josh Heupel. All right, guys, when we come back, we'll take a look, or we'll take a listen. Let me try that again. When we come back, we'll welcome Lucas Panzica onto the show, and we'll talk Tennessee at the NFL Combine. That is coming up next right here on Locked On Vols. But first, I want to tell you about FanDuel Sportsbook. Madness is here, right? NCAA tournament's coming up next weekend. The SEC tournament's happening right now in Nashville, and you can get in on all that action at FanDuel Sportsbook. And you can also bet on the NBA with no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on anything from the money line to the point scores and three-pointers drained. You can bet on the spread, the money line, the total. You can do player props as well, such as player points, player rebounds, player assists. You can also combine for more exclusive bets like 2 or 3 options, 2 three-pointers scored in the first 3 minutes or the first 5 minutes or whatever the case may be. All that and more is found at FanDuel Sportsbook. Plus, FanDuel Sportsbook even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with same-game parlay. So don't miss your chance at no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. To learn more, make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, welcome back into Locked On Vols. It is your Thursday edition of the show, and we've been pretty heavy former Vols, trying to go into the NFL, NFL Combine, Pro Days coming up. Been talking about that for a while, and deservedly so. I mean, it's been a couple years since there's been this much presence in that power T when you look through those mock drafts and when you're reading ESPN.com or whatever outlet you want to covering the draft. I mean, there's potentially, again, this is not going to happen, but there are potentially 4 guys who could be drafted in the first round. I think there will be at least 1 for sure, and then an early second. Where's Hendon Hooker going to go? Byron Young runs a 4.340 at the combine, or 4.440 at the combine. So there's a lot of Tennessee presence in terms of the NFL draft. And I want to bring on a guy from 104.5 The Zone. He does a lot of stuff over there, Lucas Panzica, a friend of the show, and you were in Indianapolis for the NFL Combine. Lucas, just kind of tell me overall thoughts from a Tennessee perspective on the performances there last weekend.
Yeah, Eric, appreciate you having me on. Look, it's been a while since Tennessee has had that much of a presence when it comes to just player media availability at the Combine, because it's not just that you have some guys there. Tennessee's always got some guys in the mix that are going to get drafted at some point, but some fairly high-profile guys. You're talking about a quarterback that's not in the conversation for a top 5 pick or maybe not even a first-round pick, but certainly one of the, I think most people would say, 5 best quarterback prospects throughout the process. The wide receiver position is an interesting one in this draft because there's no clear-cut wide receiver 1. It wouldn't be terribly shocking to go the first 15 picks in the first round and there not be a receiver taken, but it is a very deep wide receiver class, and Tennessee plays a big role in that with Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt. Both are really intriguing prospects to a lot of teams and a lot of people in the media and around the league. So it was an interesting combine from a former Vols perspective, and I thought for the most part those guys acquitted themselves pretty well, whether it was on the field for workouts and with the media doing player interviews.
Let's start with Jalen Hyatt, and it's kind of funny, and I fell victim of this myself. Well, first and foremost, let me ask you, you were there. I'm not into conspiracy theories, but, I mean, let's watch the tape and see the times from Thursday and then compare the 40 times for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Something seemed a little off there for you. I mean, there was no receiver that just had a great day running, and there was a ton of defensive linemen, 2 in particular, that were like, my goodness, I mean, how fast are these guys?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Nolan Smith is out there running about as fast as any of the fastest wide receivers at the Combine. Yeah. I don't know. I go back and forth on it because I think I've gotten a little bit jaded on Combine stuff. And I think being there for the course of the week has got me even more so to the point where I'm like, okay, great. Like Anthony Richardson can broad jump, 10 feet. That's really impressive. I mean, that's amazing. That's explosive. So if Anthony Richardson broad jumps from the line of scrimmage, be gain of 3 or maybe 4 and set up 2nd and 6, 2nd and 7. Awesome. You know what I mean? Like at some point we get so caught up in these things, and Jalen Hyatt runs a 4.440. You could say that's disappointing. And I think Hyatt built it up a little bit, if I'm being honest, because that was a question being thrown at him. Like, hey, Jalen, what's your 40 going to look like? What's your 40? And he would almost have like a smirk and a wink and be like, oh, you'll see. Oh, just wait. You'll see. And so it's like, oh my God, this guy's going to break the record. He's going to come out with like a 4.19 or something. And he runs a 4.4. That's not slow. A 4.4 is a really good 40. And I think Jalen Hyatt's tape shows he can run faster than that in a game setting. So I'm just not putting a ton of stock in it one way or another. But certainly there was not a single guy in the wide receiver group, if we're sticking with that just pulled away from the rest. Like I really, truly don't know who wide receiver 1 is in this draft. I don't know if it's Jackson Smith and Jigba, if there's an argument to be made for Hyatt, or if it's Jordan Addison who had an okay week. But there's a lot of high quality guys near the top of that wide receiver class, and Hyatt is without question one of those guys that can 1,000% stretch defenses vertically in this league. The question is, can he do some of the other things that are question marks simply because he didn't show them when he was at Tennessee because he didn't need to show them.
It's a good point. I mean, we always get so caught up in combine and pro day stuff. And we got to remember, I mean, these guys are training for these 2 days for like the last 5 months. And so, I mean, they need to look good, right? And how many times over the course of an NFL game are you going to have an offensive lineman running 40 yards in a dead sprint? You never are. But Darnell Wright running a 5.01 or whatever was really impressive at 333 pounds. I mean, it's neat and everything. And as far as Hyatt, a little disappointing in terms of the 40-yard time, but overall, I still think his performance was really good. Byron Young, Tennessee defensive lineman, outside linebacker, edge, Leo, whatever you want to call him, he flew. He ran a 4.43, I believe, and just tested off the charts. I mean, I feel like he, maybe outside of Darnell Wright, was the biggest winner. Maybe he was a bigger winner than Darnell Wright. He had a really good weekend in Indy.
Yeah, he had a really good week. I would say Will and I were talking about this on the UT podcast that we do on the Zone Podcast Network as far as, okay, who helped themselves more in Indy, Byron Young or Darnell Wright? I went with Young because Darnell Wright going into Indy was being talked about as probably the best right tackle in the draft. And if not, a first round pick, a fringe first and second round pick. And he had a great week. He ran a great 40. I think he quelled any concerns about athleticism that's necessary to play the tackle position in the NFL. But how much did Darnell Wright really move up, throughout that process? He was held in a pretty high regard. I think the Senior Bowl kind of did that for Darnell Wright. And then on the flip side of that, Byron Young, who also was at the Senior Bowl, nobody was talking about Byron Young coming out of the Senior Bowl. People were talking about Byron Young coming out of the Combine. And so his athleticism and what he did in those workouts certainly helped him. There's still questions there about how he'll hold up physically, about the things he was doing at Tennessee that he just won't be doing in the NFL, the ways he was lining up in a 4-point stance, like things that you just will not do in the league. But somebody's going to take a chance on Byron Young. And the pass rushing class is kind of similar to this wide receiver class. It's very deep. There's a lot of names out there, the Will McDonalds and the Luke Van Nesses and the Byron Youngs of the world, but there's not that clear-cut number one can't-miss prospect, which is going to make things really interesting in the way that they shake out throughout the draft process, and how Byron Young falls and all of that is going to be really fascinating.
Do you think that Darnell Wright solidified himself as a first-round pick?
I think so. Yeah, I'm not hearing anybody else talk about a right tackle that's held in a higher regard than Darnell Wright, and there are teams with a need at right tackle picking in the first round without a doubt. So I think we are to the point where I will be very surprised if he is not the first former Vol taken, and I'll be fairly surprised if he is not a first-round pick.
All the attention goes to Jalen Hyatt, but Cedric Tillman had a pretty good week at Indy. He's never going to be the fastest guy, never ever, but a 4.53 is a really good time for him. He's big, he's physical, looked like he did well in some of the other drills and running routes and catching the ball. How much do you think he helped himself out, and is he still kind of looked at as a maybe a day 2, early day 3? I think he's a day 2 pick. What do you say?
Yeah, I think right there, day 2, early day 3, and these are tough conversations to have a month and a half out from the draft. Yeah. We just have to sit here and project because suddenly there's going to be a run and the team's going to trade up for a receiver, then another receiver's gone, and then teams kind of have a fire lit under them, and maybe somebody reaches and takes Cedric Tillman in the second round or something, in the third round. I don't know how it's going to shake out, but I do think people like Cedric Tillman as a prospect with what he brings. There are several boxes that Tillman checks that Jalen Hyatt does not. There's a ton of tape on Cedric Tillman as a combat catcher, contested catches, high pointing the football, and just winning on the outside in a way that he did so consistently in 2021. He's kind of like Jackson Smith and Jigba in that respect. Of his 21 tape is so good, and in the 22 tape, there's just not a lot of it because of the injuries. Tillman. I was talking to him in the media availability. He said he was probably, even after coming back for the Kentucky game and the Georgia game, he said he was probably never above 80% after he came back for Tennessee last year. Cedric Tillman was never really Cedric Tillman in 2022, but the way that he exploded in 2021, I think people aren't going to forget that, and his size and his athleticism, that he did not do anything to set that back at the Combine. I don't think people left thinking, I just don't know if he's got the speed to do it. Yeah, I mean, Cedric Tillman maybe will be drafted closer to Jalen Hyatt than people think. I think Hyatt, like the Biletnikoff winner and all that, that's awesome. But I don't know. I think there's going to be questions about Hyatt. And it's not even his fault. Like, it's not his fault that Tennessee's offense, with the wide splits and the way it was set up where he's running free so constantly, set him up to be the Blitnikoff winner. That's great for Jalen Hyatt, and he's going to be a millionaire next year because of it. But we haven't seen him making contested catches and catching the ball over the middle of the field. And you haven't really – I asked him his favorite thing, Jalen Hyatt's favorite thing that he's excited to prove in the league. They didn't get the chance to prove at Tennessee. And he kind of lit up. He's like, "Oh, I'm glad you asked that. My route running." Our offense was so good, and that's not my fault. That was a common theme among Tennessee players, that they were defending, it's not my fault. Our offense was so good that we were so open. What am I supposed to do? That was a common thread with Hendon Hooker as well.
Yeah, I took some of your audio actually and played it on this podcast. So yeah, we know exactly what you're talking about. That was good stuff there. And then for Cedric Tillman, even when he came back, he had the case of friendly fire, had a little leg whip there at Georgia, and then missed the next game too. So it just kind of is what it is. Last thing I want to ask you, Hendon Hooker, just like in the Senior Bowl, couldn't go through drills or anything, but did interviews, met with the media, did all that type of stuff, met with front office personnel. Hendon Hooker, we talked about it a little earlier. He's he's top 5 quarterback in this draft. He's probably not going to be a first rounder, maybe. What do you think about Hendon Hooker right now?
Look, as someone that is not a X's and O's tape grinder, I'm still having a hard time figuring out why Hendon Hooker is viewed so far apart from Anthony Richardson. I get
Richardson and Levis are freaks looking, but they don't have the tape like Hooker does though.
Yeah, exactly. And I get that they're athletic freaks and they are anomalies in that respect, especially Anthony Richardson, and the ceiling is higher. Sure. All of those things. But yeah, man, why, what about the tape? What about what Hooker did so consistently is the face of college football for the majority of 2022. And so I struggle with that logic of, okay, a guy like Anthony Richardson, you got to overcome the accuracy issues and the erratic, decision making and all those things, but there's the athleticism to bank on. On the flip side with Hooker, it's it's all there. The tape is there, and the accuracy and the athleticism and the measurables. Oh, but the offense that he played in, why is it easier to think you can overcome the erratic decision making and turnovers than it is overcoming, getting him out of that mindset of a Josh Heupel-like offense? That's the part that I struggle with. And people seem to be really far apart in those things. So, but again, there's people that get paid to have those conversations, and I'm not one of those people. So I'll kind of defer to them in many cases. But I think Hendon Hooker, I think wherever Hendon Hooker lands, he's going to make a team very happy. I just struggle to find the problems with him. Any of the problems with Hooker, again, is just because he didn't really get a chance to show it because of the nature of the Tennessee offense. And it's just going to be a question that Tennessee quarterbacks are going to face when they're going into the league and they're having these conversations and they're answering these questions. I'll give him credit, though. Hooker and really every other former Tennessee player seem prepared to face those questions. Sometimes you get to these settings and these guys just it's like you didn't really think you were going to get asked that because some guys seem caught off guard about certain things. But Hendon Hooker, it's like he had that answer sitting in the back of his mind. As soon as it was asked, he jumped on it and said, well, here is why you shouldn't have any doubts about that. Here's why I was making these, protection changes at the line of scrimmage. I was taking snaps under center. It's not my fault my receivers were so open. So I think that he'll be ready for those conversations with coaches and GMs, which ultimately is obviously the most important thing in this process.
Yeah, they looked much better answering those questions than Jeremy Banks did about the South Carolina game. Dude, help yourself out here. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Lucas, man, appreciate it, dude. What do you got going on over there, 104.5 The Zone?
Man, it's just draft frenzy. Excited to have the SEC tournament back in Nashville. Obviously, we'll be broadcasting from there Thursday and Friday. Really interested to see what Tennessee's run looks like here. I think it's going to be a fascinating SEC tournament. Personally, I'm going chalk, and I think Alabama probably has that ultimate difference maker in Brandon Miller to win the thing. But I don't know. I mean, I could see Vandy making some noise, Missouri with how consistent they've been, Texas A&M with how consistent they've been in conference play, Kentucky getting hot. And then what Tennessee continues to look like without Zakai Ziegler. There's so many storylines. So that's what we're focused on here is draft and then a little bit of March Madness as well.
Lucas, appreciate it, man. Thanks so much for the time.
Thanks, Eric. Enjoyed it.
All right, that is Lucas Panzica over at 104.5 The Zone. Does an awesome job doing, filling many, many different roles for that radio station. You can follow him on Twitter at Lucas Panzica as well. All right, when we come back, we will tie a bow on this edition of Locked On Vols, so stay tuned. All right, guys, welcome back into it. We will be short and sweet because we went a little overboard in segments 1 and 2 of the show, but let's kind of stay on this theme and let's talk NFL draft. We'll discuss all of Tennessee at the SEC tournament on tomorrow's show and kind of paint the picture for who Tennessee will be playing on Friday, which, again, it better win coming up tonight, am I right? But let's stay talking about Tennessee, NFL prospectus, and all that. So Todd McShay, in his latest NFL first-round mock draft, has a Tennessee Volunteer mock to go in the first round. That would be Darnell Wright. 24th overall to the Jacksonville Jaguars is where Todd McShay has Darnell Wright projected right now. Here's what he has to say about that. If the Jaguars let Jawan Taylor leave in free agency, Wright could be his replacement at right tackle opposite of Cam Robinson. He plays with great balance and is an outstanding run blocker. At 6'5", 333 pounds, he ran a 5.01 in the 40-yard dash, showing his quickness and his athleticism. I like what I saw at the Senior Bowl too. Wright would help keep quarterback Trevor Lawrence upright and open up seams for running back Trevor Etienne Jr. as the Jags continue to emerge as a player in the AFC. He allowed just 1 sack in 2022, and remember, I believe that came in the Orange Bowl, but I don't believe that was actually credited to Darnell Wright. I believe the stat still is he ended his Tennessee career with 19 straight games not allowing a sack. I believe that's the more accurate tone there, but nonetheless, Darnell Wright is a player, and he's continuing to get more first-round love or more first-round love in the NFL draft, and we will see if it ends up being a reality. I think it's going to be. I truly, truly do. Running a 40-yard dash, and again, when's a 40-yard dash going to be really important to an offensive lineman? It's not. That's the question, but it just shows how athletic he is to be 333 pounds, running a 5.01 40. His broad jump, his vertical jump. I dropped the stat earlier this week that 2 other offensive linemen weighing over 330 pounds ran a faster 40-yard dash time than Darnell Wright at the Pro Bowl or at the NFL Combine in the last 20 years. It's an insane stat. That's incredible. Just goes to show you the specimen that Darnell Wright is. So in his latest mock draft, Todd McShay has Darnell Wright going 24th overall to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So McShay, along with ESPN's Matt Miller and Jordan Reed, have Wright as the 4th best offensive tackle in the draft, behind Northwestern's Peter Skoronski, Ohio State's Paris Johnson Jr., which every single mock draft I've ever seen throughout this entire mock draft process has Paris Johnson Jr. going 11th to the Tennessee Titans. And then Georgia's Broderick Jones. Mel Kiper Jr., on the other hand, has Wright as his 2nd best tackle in the draft, only behind Johnson Jr. ESPN's list of top available players, Wright comes in at number 27 overall and number 4 at his position with a grade of 89. Jordan Reed named Wright as one of the biggest risers after his performance last week at the NFL Combine. This is from Jordan Reed on Darnell Wright. Wright continues his strong pre-draft process. Positioned in the 2nd group of offensive linemen, I thought he looked the best of the bunch during the on-the-field drills. And after playing guard during his first 2 seasons with the Vols, Wright transitioned to right tackle, where he had a breakout senior season. Again, that is so inaccurate, it hurts. This is a perfect example of just do your homework, right? And I understand that draft analysts have got to have all these different players from all these different schools, and their minds going a million miles a minute. But Darnell Wright, sure, he played some guard, a little bit of guard, but he has been an offensive tackle since day one, where he stepped foot on campus as a 5-star freshman and started at right tackle as a true freshman at 17 years old. So again, that just pisses me off, to be completely frank with you. Anyway, more from Jordan Reed. His range as a pass protector was on full display as his movements were quick and efficient. His hand power was noticeable while going through drills too. He and Broderick Jones are considered the 2 best right tackle prospects in the class. The belief among people in the league is that both can be top 40 picks. I have Wright graded slightly higher as my OT4, but Jones is right behind him. So a lot of praise for Darnell Wright, who I believe will be a first-round draft pick. Let's see, McShay. Let's go back here to McShay's and his first-round draft. Let's see where he has Broderick Jones going, if he has him at all. Little control. Okay, he has Broderick Jones going to the New York Jets at number 13. So in this simulation, you've got, let's count them up here, shall we? You got Darnell Wright being the, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4th. He would be the 4th offensive tackle taken in this mock draft from Todd McShay and his latest one over at ESPN.com. So that's some really good stuff there. Could Jalen Hyatt still be a first-round pick? Absolutely. Could a team desperate to find the guy, maybe move up, maybe take Hendon Hooker at the end of the first round? Could Byron Youngs, could his 40-yard dash time propel him into a French first-round pick? I think the latter two are probably not likely, but I do think Darnell Wright is going to be a first-rounder, and he's getting continual praise, as we said he would during this NFL draft process. So we'll have plenty of time to talk about the NFL draft, but just some notable stuff there as we inch ever closer to the NFL draft that's coming up at the end of April, and really, really looking forward to that. All right, plenty of Tennessee basketball hoops coverage coming up on tomorrow's show. Plus, we'll continue to look more into the positions with a Caner take. I've tried to take a little spin on it, and not just do a position preview, if you will, but also give a pretty strong take on, what I think about this position. So we're going to have more on that on tomorrow's show. All that and more, and hopefully we're going to meet with a very special guest that I think you guys are going to really love to hear from. That is coming up on tomorrow's show. This is Locked On Vols. You can always find it at _Caner on Twitter and at Locked On Vols on Twitter. The YouTube page. Please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and as always, you can find this wherever you find your podcast, making it your first listen. Make Locked On SEC, make Locked On College Basketball your second and third listen right after Locked On Vols. Same time, same place. We'll try again tomorrow, everybody. This is Locked On Vols.